Welcome to OECD Talk series on COVID and culture. Today, we're here to discuss cultural participation in the times of COVID and beyond. And we have with us Justine SIMONS OBE, Deputy Mayor of London for Culture and Creative Industries and Chair of World Culture Cities Forum. World Culture Cities Forum, our partner in this talk series, brings together 38 cities from across the globe for an exchange on policy innovation on how to support the creative economy. Justine, welcome and thank you so much for being with us. So my first question to you is, why is cultural participation important? Why should we care?
Thank you so much. Just to say thank you for the invitation. I think that this collaboration we have between OECD and the World Cities Culture Forum is really fantastic. We've got so much in common, so we are really happy to be collaborating with you on this. I think what is really important is that, you know, cities share their experiences and their action plans at this time to support culture, which has, of course, been completely devastated by the pandemic. You know, I think we are all agreed that culture has a central role to play in the social and economic recovery of cities. You know, and I think that it's a moment for us to be ambitious. You know, if we look back in history, you know, after the World Wars, you know, you had the establishment of the Arts Council in the UK. Major funding system came into being after that. It was a bold idea post-war. And then you look back at in the USA at post-depression, where you had Roosevelt's New Deal, which included the public works program. And you've got kind of artists being employed to help the kind of civic and social and the fabric, the rebuilding and the reconstruction of the fabric of society. And, you know, artists like Jackson Pollock and Rothko got their break really through that program. So, I mean, my feeling is this is, you know, this has been a devastating pandemic and we need to respond with real boldness and ambition. And we need to, you know, put culture center stage in our recovery. I think also because, you know, we know that instinctively culture matters to us, as well as all the economic, the tourism, the jobs, the growth. As human beings, culture really matters to us, you know. From a city perspective, it's our DNA, it's our identity, our culture in a way is our story. And also in this pandemic, it's been a real kind of, it's been a source of solace, I think, for us all in the pandemic. You know, we've all kind of read books, written poetry, danced in our kitchens, watched theatre online, burned through Netflix, you know. We've really relied on culture in a way. And I think we have to kind of honour that. You know, we have to kind of, you know, accept the big role that culture plays in our lives and in our, you know, economic and social and mental health.
Yes, thanks so much. And indeed, I think we all saw that these levels of cultural participation, I mean, increased because we all craved to be connected and to have access to all the different movies and songs, etc. But can you maybe share with us your reflection and maybe also reflections from your 38 cities on how has cultural participation changed during these times, during the pandemic crisis?
Yes, well, across the World Cities Culture Forum, there's 38 cities, as you said, and I think really during this pandemic, it's been a lifeline, and we've met together every few weeks to just really crunch through, you know, the big kind of issues we're facing and how we can do our best to respond to them, to protect culture, to support it, and to support kind of citizens in all our cities. And that has been a really rich and brilliant dialogue, that peer-to-peer exchange across the world. I think in terms of what we've learnt, there's a number of themes that have emerged, and I'll just quickly run through them. And these, I think, are the kind of common themes all around the world when you think about COVID, culture and cities. I think the first is culture online. You know, there's been this real rush to digital. You know, which has brought with it opportunities and challenges. So, you know, lots of theatres and galleries have really opened up their collections, their shows to a wider audience, and boosted their kind of audience numbers around the world. The flip side of that is, not everyone is online. There's a study from the Broadband Commission which states that 46% of the world's population is offline. So, when we talk about participation and access, we can't talk about that without acknowledging that almost half of the population of the planet can't access digital culture. So I think we've got to really double down and think about and address that. I think the other question that has come through for us is, how do you pay artists and creatives when you push culture online? Already artists and freelancers have been hit pretty hard by the pandemic. We were looking at an Australian study which showed that, while 3 out of 4 Australian citizens had consumed culture online, however, only 1 in 3 had paid for it. So the monetization of culture online in a way that reaches the people who really need it, the artists and curators and creators, I think is a big issue that we've all got to, get under the skin of and fix. So that, I would say, that's one of the big kind of themes that's happened. Other things very quickly I'll run through. Data. All cities around the world capturing data. We need to know what this pandemic has meant in economic terms, and we need that in order that we can, make the case and understand how we can design our policy work to best support culture. We've all been talking about behavioural change and building public confidence to come back to culture at the right moment. We've been building the arguments. There's a lot of conversation across cities about going back to basics with arguing for culture and making the case for culture, because of course, the world has changed dramatically, and now lots of cities are thinking about very basic things like the provision of healthcare, food supply, housing. So, a question for us as cities is, how do we nuance and make the arguments for culture in these quite kind of stark environments in cities? I would say equity and inclusion. COVID has not hit us all equally, and we have seen that inequalities have been amplified through COVID in many different ways. It's revealed also the fragility in the labour market, artists and freelancers really getting hit hard. Cultural tourism, we've talked a lot about that. I mean, for a city like London, where we're super reliant on international visitors, we've lost over 10 billion in tourism, and 4 out of 5 tourists say they come to London for culture. So that's been a real kind of collapse around the world. And what's happened is this real kind of pivot to the local, so domestic tourism starting in a kind of hyper-local way on your doorstep, on your high street. So we're seeing a lot of that. And there's lots of examples around the world. Buenos Aires are taking library books to older citizens. Hong Kong have got a museum of art on wheels, taking collections out to different neighborhoods. Helsinki have an arts gifts app where you can order a live performance for your doorstep. And in Milan, we've been hearing about how they really accelerated the use of the reclaiming of public spaces in a very kind of quick and kind of flexible way, using kind of temporary street furniture and asphalt art. So a big push to that kind of local, domestic kind of cultural tourism and cultural engagement. And then finally, I'd just say, lots of talk about money and philanthropy and how we can work better together to make all of our money and our investment go much further and more strategically work together. And the big thing really is about reform in recovery. So, how can we build back better, to use the phrase that everyone uses? What do we want this world to look like, and how can we hold on to those values and that ambition for culture in our cities post-pandemic?
Thank you so much. And maybe to conclude, what in your view are the 2-3 actions that cities can take to improve access or to support cultural participation in the times of COVID, or hopefully beyond as well?
Yeah, very good. I mean, in London, I tend to talk about 2 things: hardwiring and future-proofing. So hardwiring culture into the city, and now hardwiring it into the recovery, and future-proofing culture so that we are more resilient in the future. So, you know, talking about hardwiring, you know, for example, the economic side of things, you know, we're really keen that culture plays a big role in the generation of jobs. So if we look at our film industry, for example, that is back up and running now. And we know it's a growth area. We know these jobs are not likely to be automated. You know, we want to kind of lean in to the areas across the creative economy where we can really deliver jobs and growth at a time when, you know, cities really, really need them. So I think there's that kind of potential there. I think in terms of the social side of things, you know, mental health, you know, has been a big, big priority. You know, it has been really hard for all of us to cope with the kind of mental health challenges of living through a pandemic. And again, to kind of position culture as part of that solution. We saw it instinctively in the pandemic, in the lockdowns, when people went to get solace through culture. And now I think we've got to hardwire it in. You know, we were looking at a study from the University College London, which actually was a really big study, 72,000 adults. And of those who spent 30 minutes a day on an arts activity, they had much lower levels of depression, less anxiety, you know, in the pandemic. So there's lots of evidence now, I think, about the positive role culture can play in our mental health, and we've got to hardwire that into our recovery. And then finally, the future-proofing. You know, I think COVID, as I said, has revealed these systematic issues we've got. And so we've really got to think imaginatively and quickly to think about how we can future-proof culture in our cities. And that's everything from freelancers and working conditions for artists, pay scales, equality of access to culture from all our citizens, you know, and just to kind of look at kind of representation, all of those things that have been kind of amplified, those issues, those kind of systemic issues. We've got to kind of really dig into those and future-proof culture in our cities, I would say.
No, very inspiring and quite a clear and very ambitious and bold, as you say, roadmap for cities, no? So with this, thank you so much. And thank you also for our brilliant partnership, and we hope to continue in the future. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.